Now, we've got a very interesting story coming up now, which features the chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation, who we are going to have live on the programme after 9 o'clock, just after 9 o'clock this morning. He has said that white officers worry, they hesitate when dealing with ethnic minorities. Why?
Over fears that they could be investigated on the grounds of racism. This is according to Rick Pryor. He spoke to GBNews exclusively, saying that racism of low expectation means that the Met does not criticise bad behaviour. Now, joining us in the studio, the man who broke this story, our national reporter, Charlie Peters, on this. Pretty worrying, but I'd have to say to you, Charlie, goodness me, if I was a police officer, I think I would be in the same position, the same boat. You'd be worried.
Yes, and I think Rick can say this quite strident language because he has the confidence of knowing that many police officers feel as he does, and that there is a crisis of confidence in policing at the moment, particularly on these potentially controversial altercations and also potentially violent incidents that occur all too often within the capital. Now, he's pointed to a couple of instances that have happened over the last few years. One, last year, there was a bus fare evasion incident in Croydon. The woman who was stopped by a police officer hadn't actually failed to pay for the fare, but he asked to see her Oyster card while supporting revenue protection teams. She refused, and he then arrested her. He was later charged with assault. He was fined. His name was in the press. He felt, as you can imagine, pretty low about it. Now, that conviction was quashed last week, but for 18 months, that officer's been in limbo. And the reason why I spoke to Rick about this...
So if you were an officer, what you're saying is basically you'd think, oh, she may not have paid, I'm going to check that out. Do you know what? I'm not going to bother. It's not worth the hassle.
Precisely. And you know what? The Mets made that decision for them because as a consequence of that situation and the controversy it generated, the Metropolitan Police no longer support TfL revenue protection teams. They're not even bothering to carry on with that work for fear of those situations occurring again. That's what police officers have told me yesterday. And pointing to that case in particular, Rick Pryor was speaking to me yesterday, and he said that it pointed to all sorts of the concerns that police officers feel about this situation.
Now, we should also say that you, as a member of the public, may have concerns as well, and you may be saying, oi, but, you know, they do discriminate against me and they do act out of line or whatever it is, and that may well be the case, but the overriding feeling from a person charged with enforcing the law or protecting the peace and whatever is that this is going to go against me, the officer.
And I think the Met don't want to agitate that feeling that you've just referred to, I mean, that people do often feel as though they are targeted excessively by the police. And that's why Rick Pryor is saying that there is this racism of low expectations. For fear of not upsetting certain communities and minority ethnic people in the city, they're saying, oh, we won't call out bad behaviour, such as that woman who didn't show her Oyster card, who refused to engage politely with the police officer when they were approached. That sort of situation.
Do you think she knew her rights? Do you think she, you know, I did do this and I'm not going to produce this card, and therefore she just knew she was negotiating from a position of strength?
Well, watching the footage, it's uncomfortable because you don't want to see this sort of thing, a police officer approaching someone as part of their work with the TfL protection teams, and it all sort of falling apart in a strange way and escalating very rapidly. But the Met, and I think many officers would contend, well, the Met privately would contend this, but many officers have told me this sort of anonymously in the last couple of days as I've been looking into this, that they certainly feel as though the problem there was not with their officer, but with poor behaviour from a member of the public. And the Met, they say, are shying away from criticising bad behaviour because they feel as though they might be accused of racism.
And I suppose this isn't just a London problem where the Met is a force, but the reason you were speaking to Rick was obviously following on from the press conference by Nigel Farage and members of Reform yesterday, all tied into their concerns around the incident at Manchester Airport on the 23rd of July last year. Now, our audience will be aware there's an investigation active. It could well be a trial in the future, so be careful what we say. But tell us effectively what Reform pledged to do yesterday.
Well, Reform are giving the Home Secretary initial notice that they're preparing a legal private criminal prosecution with regards to that case for the men involved, the alleged assailants in the incident with those several police officers. But they're waiting for the CPS to make a decision. Greater Manchester Police have said they've had a file with the CPS since mid-August. And Reform did criticise Greater Manchester Police for not releasing any footage. What we've seen so far has come from mobile phones and some further fuller leaked CCTV that many say exonerates the officers or perhaps mitigates the circumstances that come later. But the police have said they don't do that. They never do that. And that's, in fact, the norm. They don't release footage during an investigation of this sort.
Right, you're back after 9 o'clock. So is Rick Pryor. He's chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation. You've spoken to him exclusively. We're going to speak to him again live on the programme. Is there anything you want members of the public to do who are watching us this morning?
But do you think Rick's telling the truth? Do you think he's accurately representing police officers? Do you feel as though if you were a police officer, you'd have the full confidence to approach anyone and tackle any crime?
Thank you, Charlie. There's how you do this, how you get in touch via our website. So I just was building up. There it is there. There it is there. gbnews.com /your say. Please do get in touch. Okay, well, let's hear from the man himself, chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation, Rick Pryor. Rick, good morning to you. Has Charlie represented your case correctly there?
Good morning. Yes, he has. There's a striking crisis of confidence at the moment within policing in general, and certainly within the Metropolitan Police, whereby officers are withdrawing from any kind of proactive policing for fear of falling foul of the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Conduct, or a vexatious or malicious complaint. There seems to be an assumption of racism right from the off, particularly when it's a white police officer and a member of the public from a minority ethnic community. And it almost seems as if the onus is then on the police officer to prove that the interaction wasn't racist. And we've found that in the two recent cases that have been highly publicised, both in the Croydon bus incident and also the Dos Santos and Bianca Williams stop and search incident.
Can I read the response to you of the president of the National Black Police Association, who was quite shocked by what you've been saying? He said there have been many seminal reports into the racism that the black community suffer at the hands of Met officers in London over many years. He says it's ridiculous that Rick Pryor and others would try to use a small number of high-profile cases to delegitimise the evidence found in many reports, most recently from Baroness Casey, and she famously found the Metropolitan Police institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic.
But you know what? I think that's missing the point. I don't think that's what the fellow's talking about. Now, I absolutely agree. I think if you are a black person or whatever, you may well be worried. But also as an officer, Charlie, that there is a fear that the cards are stacked against you. Is that really what we're talking about?
Well, I think that is the perspective that I've heard, certainly from other police officers that I've spoken to on this case. And it comes on the back of a discussion that Reform UK, that political party, launched yesterday in a press conference about the Manchester airport incident. So I phoned Rick on the back of that, hoping to speak to him about concerns police officers are having about investigations by the Office for Police Conduct. And obviously this isn't his patch, he's a Metropolitan Police officer, but this is a widespread concern across the country where officers now feel as though they are being tarnished with this perspective of being institutionally racist. And I think another interesting point that we heard from Rick in the interview yesterday that I'd like to bring up now was that, Rick, you're also very critical of Met's leadership. You say that they are failing to call out bad behaviour from some members of the public. And I think you told me that this is the racism of low expectations. They're scared to call out bad behaviour.
Yes, that is what I termed it. When the behaviour of certain individuals it clearly falls below that of which society expects, I think it's incumbent on police leaders to support their officers who are charged with dealing with these type of incidents to come out and call out that behaviour. And I mean, the example of which I relate this to was the recent Croydon bus incident matter, where it was clear that the lady in question behaved poorly. It's a quite reasonable expectation of society that if you travel on transport, London transport, on the buses, the trains, you know that if you are asked to produce a valid ticket for travel, you show that ticket. Had that happened in this case, there would have been no incident. And so it was the behaviour of the lady in question that instigated the whole matter.